Unlike pretty much every other team in Minnesota over the weekend, the Wild actually got their preseason started with a win over the Colorado Avalanche. We'll talk about that as well as what we learned in training camp and some of the roster battles that we'll see between now and the start of the season today on Locked on Wild.
You're Locked on Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is happening, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Locked on Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you, as always, for making Locked on Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms so you don't miss out on any new episodes or any Minnesota Wild news as we move closer to the start of the season. On today's episode of Locked on Wild, Alex Micheletti joins the show as we discuss the Wild's 4-3 win over the Colorado Avalanche to kick off the preseason. We'll talk about some of the stars from the game, as well as what we learned from training camp as we move through the rest of the preseason. We'll take a look at some battles to watch as well. My name is Seth Topal, your daily Minnesota Wild insider, and as mentioned, joined by Alex Micheletti for our usual Micheletti Monday. And the Vikings, the Gophers, the Twins won.
Twins won.
The Minnesota Wilds were able to get a win and started off their preseason with a nifty little 4-3 win over the Colorado Avalanche, a game in which Sammy Walker had 2 goals. Vinni Lettieri stole one. If you were listening to the Colorado Avalanche broadcast, stole one from Sammy Walker to complete the hat trick. Jujhar Khaira had a goal as well. And so preseason is always kind of take it with a grain of salt. But a solid start to the preseason for the Wild, and best of all, with the exception of that pretty scary situation for Damon Hunt, with the exception there, it seemed like the team got out of the game without sustaining any further injuries.
Yeah, thank goodness. Yeah, that's one thing that you're always worried about in the preseason. Especially with hockey, it's a lot different than the other sports. You don't see your full team a whole lot in the games. They kind of like separate them into pods or split sessions of especially if a team is traveling for a preseason game, and so it's kind of discombobulated a lot. And sometimes you have really experienced guys going up against guys that are young, and so you just never know what you're going to get, and sometimes that can create chaos and injuries. So yeah, it's very you just pray that you come out without any regulars getting hurt.
Yeah, and the situation with Damon Hunt was that he got hit in the face and was in some clear discomfort, and so his status obviously we'll have to keep an eye on that here over the next couple of days. But you had Sammy Walker, who just continues to stand out. He stood out in training camp. He is continuing to stand out here in the preseason. Vinni Lettieri lights the lamp, which was nice to see. Jujhar Khaira, as we mentioned, he had a goal as well. And so you get some of these guys that are clearly battling for spots on this roster that are going to be pretty tricky to come up with. All those guys are battling. And honestly, if you're looking for like the one thing to kind of, well, how do we watch preseason games? What do we take away? Is you just look for the guys that are noticeable, that stand out. And you're going to have obviously your top guys that if they do play, they're obviously going to stand out. But those guys that are battling for spots on the roster, and even some of those prospects too, if they stand out amongst those other NHL prospects / players, that's the good sign that you're looking for here throughout the preseason. The results, Bill Guerin has pretty much said this spot on. The results really don't matter. You're just looking for a good battle level to get yourself ready for the regular season.
Yeah, 100%. And it was nice to see all the guys that scored today were battling for that, quote unquote last roster spot. But as we were talking off air, it's like the Patrick Starfish meme. I only have like $1. If they try to carry a 13th forward, they have less than $50,000. That is outrageous in today's world. When you have other teams like the Coyotes that are trying to carry on guys that probably some that haven't played in the NHL a couple of years just to get to the cap floor, and then you have teams that like the Wild that always try to play near the cap, but now they're even they're on the brink of hitting it right at the cap, which is wild. And so like we talked about too, they might have to go stretches where they're playing 11-7, which last year was a nightmare for the Wild, just because you struggle with line changes and getting in that seventh defenseman sometimes, or who's going to double shift on the like in a fourth line type situation, or having a top line guy play double minutes, but then they can get tired easily. So yeah, it's gonna be wild. No pun intended. But so yeah, I mean, just you have to pray also no early season injuries too, because that can create chaos. But those guys like we talked about, Walker, Kari, Vinni Lettieri, there's basically only one forward spot that they're banking on, and that's if Marco Rossi struggles, and then if he gets sent down, if he's in the Dean doghouse like Kalen Addison was last year. That's the only way that those guys get up, other than an injury. So it's going to be very tight all season.
And I'll just put it out here just because we're kind of on the topic. The difference between putting a player on injured reserve and long-term injured reserve. Injured reserve requires not playing for 7 calendar days, while long-term injured reserve involves not playing for 24 calendar days in 10 NHL games. The full rules for long-term IR are laid out in Article 50.10. As mentioned, long-term injured reserve allows a team to exceed the upper limit of the salary cap, but only once the upper limit is reached. And so it's not something that the Wild have used previously, and obviously you never hope to have a situation in which you have to, but the Wild had a few guys last year who missed more than 10 games that were not put on long-term injured reserve, and I wonder if we see that this year because of how limited the cap space is for this team.
Yeah, they've never done it ever. It's just amazing. And then you see teams like Tampa Bay and Chicago, Vegas, really take advantage of it and have postseason success because of using that loophole. It's it's crazy that not one time, especially in the Suter Parisi era too. It's it's just crazy that never ever came about too. So. Yeah, well, we clearly hope that there isn't injuries. If that does happen, use the strategy while it's still legal. Take advantage.
What'll end up happening is the Wild will use it for the first time, and then Gary Bettman will be like, I don't think we're going to allow this.
The investigators
anymore.
Take a look at the medical records and say that the Wild are faking it.
They're like, you know what? We're going to impose future cap penalties on the Minnesota Wild for abusing the long-term injured reserve situation. And then I'm probably going to pay a little visit to league headquarters if that ends up being the case. So the good news, though, is that it seems like by and large, the Minnesota Wild are relatively healthy going into the preseason. And so we'll talk about that. Some of the other things that we learned from the training camp portion of the preseason, that is on the way as we continue today's episode of Locked on Wild after this. With storms, shortages, pandemics, reliance on China, and supply chain issues, we need to be prepared now more than ever. And everyone should be empowered to take care of themselves and their loved ones during the unexpected. That's why Jace Medical offers the Jace Case. The Jace Case provides 5 life saving antibiotics for emergency use and gives you a peace of mind so that you're not just hoping that you have access to medication in an emergency. Jace Medical makes sure you have the medication in hand. Jace Medical is simple. They handle everything from the online evaluation to licensed pharmacy medication delivery and ongoing consultation and care. Don't get caught unprepared. Go check out jacemedical.com today. Plus, you can get $20 off these life-saving antibiotics today from Jace Medical by using code LOCKEDON at checkout on jacemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com. Continuing today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Again, a reminder for the everydayers, you're going to want to tune in for tomorrow's episode. We got a treat for you as Minnesota Wild fourth liner Brandon Duhaime will be joining the show. We'll run through some listener-submitted questions, talk about the offseason, being line mates with Pat Maroon. Plenty to discuss with Brandon Duhaime on tomorrow's show. Very much looking forward to that. So make sure you don't miss it by subscribing right now on YouTube and your favorite podcast platform and turning those notifications on so you don't miss out on any new episodes. Continuing our chat with Alex Micheletti today. And Alex, let's talk about the brief training camp portion of the preseason. We learned a few things that I thought were interesting throughout the course of the lead up to the first preseason game. Number one, kind of what we assumed, Marcus Foligno was dealing with a pretty substantial injury the back half of the season last year. He had surgery in the offseason to clean things up, and the hope is now that he will be able to get back closer to the form that he showed a couple of years ago. And I'm not even just talking about goals per se, just talking about his ability to be physical out there and just be the Marcus Foligno that we've come to know, because he did not look like it the second half of the season, especially this past year.
Yeah, 100%. When the grief line RIP was going, they were absolutely dominant. When Greenway was 100% focused, and showing up on time, and Eriksson Ek and him were. I mean, they that's what made the Wild good is having that physical third line. Hopefully they can get back to that. But with Foligno and Gaudreau and Rossi, most likely, having a solid checking line like that can take some pressure off the top six would do wonders for the Wild, especially in such a competitive central division. It seems like it's going to be harder than last year. And we take a look, Dallas picks up Matt Duchene, and then Colorado makes some interesting moves, getting Ryan Johansson and Thomas Tatar, Miles Wood from the Devils, and so yeah, it's it's gonna be, and then Nashville gets Ryan O'Reilly, who I keep bringing up on here, that is just always a pain to play against, as we remember from the Blues. So it's just gonna be a dogfight. You will earn your spot in the playoffs this year from the Central. Mark my words.
Yeah, 100%. And you got to be able to attack this thing as healthy as you can be. Nice to hear confirmation from Bill Guerin that Joel Eriksson Ek, Kirill Kaprizov, some of those guys that were injured at the end of the season. In fact, pretty much all of them have had a chance to fully heal. There was mention that there was one player that was dealing with an injury that was different than what happened at the end of the season. And so we were going to kind of figure that out as things played out. Turns out it was Ryan Hartman. And so he started training camp on the no contact list. but was moved off of it and has been given the full green light to compete here in the rest of the preseason. And so it sounds like this team is all systems go.
Yes, finally, right? I even think that Kirill, he didn't look the same after the. Thanks Logan Stanley for just going WWE on 97. That was tough, and so yeah, he had a tough stretch there against Dallas. So I think he's raring to go, and Bill Guerin was interviewed by Dan Barreiro the other day, and which was an awesome interview. And he said, no doubt in my mind that he thinks Kirill can hit 50. I think he's motivated to get there and be the player that we all expect him to be. So it's going to be interesting to watch that. And they clearly missed Eriksson Ek too with this limited depth on center. He is such an important player, and maybe he can try to win the award that Patrice Bergeron had for forever in the Selke. And so yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see how Ek does this year.
Yeah, and I think that's probably the reason that I picked in the SodaPod's divisional preview show, which I believe will be dropping on podcast feeds today as well. I picked the Winnipeg Jets to finish 7th in the division, and I think because of the injury to Kirill Kaprizov, I just anticipated that all the karma would come back to bite the Jets this year. I don't forget. So take that, Winnipeg Jets. The other one that we learned that will be interesting to see how it plays out is that Marco Rossi, and you may notice we're saying Rossi now because that was corrected during the interview session. Is that if people struggle to roll their R's, I absolutely can't. Then Rossi is fine, and so
we're in favor of that. I'm
going to take that opportunity and run with it because I can't roll my R's to save my life. So Marco Rossi has beefed up a little bit. 15 pounds of muscle in the off season. Not only that, but he stayed in Minnesota throughout
missed
the
his sister's wedding too.
Yeah,
that was crazy.
I just want to say that I was bummed out by that part of the whole thing because I get wanting to put in the work to put yourself in position to have a major impact on this team, but having it come at the sacrifice of stuff like that
was
is
tough.
just always something that I think just kind of sucks. But again, credit to Rossi for putting in the time here, adding some muscle to his frame, and working all off season with the Wild strength and conditioning coach, skating coach Andy Ness, putting in a ton of time to put himself in position to now where he can succeed. And really, it looks as though the way that this is going to play out is that he's going to start on that third line. And if he performs well, the moment that somebody in that top 6 starts to struggle is when he gets the opportunity to elevate.
Yeah, and that's what he's always wanted to. And it's good to see that he's motivated to. He just has to show it in the regular season. Last year he led the team in preseason points, so it was there. But then for whatever reason, when the lights were on, then something changed. So hopefully now with this added strength and in muscle, that's gonna do wonders because I think when it became the regular season, he was getting pushed around, and now if he has that added strength, he can push around those guys back, and that's huge. And I think he just has to play relaxed too. I think he put way too much pressure on himself, and that doesn't help your confidence either.
No, it just makes it tough because then it seems like the more pressure you put on yourself, the more every instance in which you are handling the puck or even just trying to do the simple things feels like a life or death situation where it's like, if I don't do the absolute perfect play here, I'm gonna get booted off the team.
Well, yeah, and we take a look at the playoffs. This past playoffs. I remember talking to you and sending videos and just watching games with you. Anton Lundell, Seth Jarvis. I mean, we see guys that are picked after him in his same draft class, and they are succeeding in the NHL. So he sees that too, and he doesn't want to have the bus label attached to him. No one wants to have that as a part of their legacy, and so he's extremely motivated to be like the rest of the draft class.
Yeah, and it can be frustrating too, because you put yourself as a player in a situation to where you're hoping that you succeed at a level that then the coaching staff is going to reward, and we just really didn't see the opportunity there. So you've got kind of two sides of this coin. Is like, you as the player have to play well enough for the coaches to put you in situations, but if you're not put in good situations right off the bat, it doesn't lead to the success that we were hoping to see. And so what I'm going to do this year is just take everything that happened with that situation last year, from the hype video of congratulations, you made the team, to the 20 games with 1 point, playing third and fourth line minutes. I'm flushing all of it and I'm going to view Rossi as a new player on this team this year, completely flush the expectations and see what happens. He's either going to look like an NHL player or he's not.
Yeah, 100%. And you get the Florida Panthers, the team that was in the Stanley Cup right off the bat. So, it's right from the beginning. You're getting a quality team, and so it's going to be fascinating to see how he does. And then Austin Matthews and that crew. So it's no rest for the wicked for sure.
No rest at all. Well, we're going to audible here, because something popped into my head that I did want to talk about a little bit. Special teams, because when is special teams never not at the forefront of the conversation? And so we're just going to roll through and look at kind of where the Wild's special teams units are sitting from a personnel standpoint to start the year. And we'll amend, we'll adapt, we'll move people around, we'll do whatever we need to do, because we are going to fix the Wild special teams as we finish today's episode of Locked On Wild after this. Kick yourself into a bunch of wins this season during the NFL with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there is no better time to get in on the action. The action in the NFL is absolutely bonkers. For instance, you might have taken the Miami Dolphins, who scored 70 points against the Denver Broncos over the weekend, or the Minnesota Vikings, who had it on the goal line and threw an interception to lose. Regardless of if you went with the Dolphins or the Vikings, you can still get a ton of bonus bets to use on spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. All you have to do is visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get the NFL season started right. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Final segment of today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Again, make sure tomorrow to check out our interview with Brandon Duhaime as we gear up for the start of the season. We'll ask Brandon about his offseason and his expectations for where the Wilds can go this season. So make sure to tune in for that. Coming up on tomorrow's episode of Locked On Wild. All right, we're going to finish today's episode by talking about the special teams units. Alex, let's just roll through the personnel, see if we agree. And I'm taking this based off of the Daily Face-Off. Let's see if we agree And if we don't, who should be in the particular spots on the power play and on the penalty kill. So, first power play unit for the Minnesota Wild: Matt Zuccarello, Joel Eriksson Ek, Matt Boldy, Kirill Kaprizov, Kalen Addison.
Yeah, I don't really have an issue with that.
No.
That's what they had for the most part for for the last season. The only guy that that you could maybe put in there is Marcus Johansson, and then either move Zuccarello, or Bold, just to try to get more depth for the second unit there, because the second unit we just always seem to just like, oh no, they get out there and they don't even get a shot on goal, so maybe try to even out the units, but that would be the only guy that you would maybe think about putting on the second unit.
Second unit: Ryan Hartman, Marco Rossi, Marcus Johansson, Freddie Gaudreau, Jared Spurgeon.
I don't know. I mean, the only guy, that isn't on there right now that you could maybe put on there is, Patrick Maroon's played the second power play unit in Tampa, and when he was with St. Louis a little bit too, as like a net front presence. So you could maybe plug him in there, if they're struggling, because he still has the hands to score a little bit. So we saw him score some nice deflected goals last year with Tampa Bay. So maybe taking Hartman's spot. That's the only guy that you could really put in there. Spurgeon, he's not really a power play guy. So if Alex Goligoski is in the lineup, he's played power play a lot in his career. That's the only other guy that you would really you would put in on the power play. I mean, you saw Foligno on there last year, and it wasn't really wasn't really pretty. So
no, it did not do the job. I do like the idea of Maroon as a net front guy, because I feel like one of the other things that kind of plagued that second unit throughout the course of the year is that they didn't have a guy that could go stand in front of the net. It was just it was just a collection of other players.
It was a mess. It was chaos when they would come over the boards, and it was you had pucks just going over the net, or just they had trouble just even getting in the zone too. They never changed their zone entry. It was way too predictable.
Yeah. Tyson Jost, second power play specialist.
Yeah, it was not good.
No. So I like the idea of having the net front guy on that second unit. Now, penalty kill, we see the first unit of Freddie Gaudreau, Connor Dewar, Jake Middleton, and Jared Spurgeon. Why in the world is Joel Eriksson Ek not your number one penalty kill center?
Yeah, he should.
Off.
He 100% should be. I don't really understand that, but Middleton, Spurgeon, rock solid. But Eriksson Ek should be the first off the board there too, especially if you have to win a face-off. That's who I want as the top killer.
I don't know. I don't know why that is. So then your second unit should probably be then Freddie Gaudreau. They have then Freddie Gaudreau, Marcus Foligno, Jonas Brodin, and Brock Faber. Defensively, zero issues there.
Yep.
But I don't know. Freddie Gaudreau, I think, is fine.
He's fine
as that second center. Foligno's kind of the spot where I'm like, yeah, if he's playing well, that's probably okay, but
you want some speed. You want some speed on that penalty kill. So I mean, Dewar was, when he got time on the penalty kill, he was phenomenal. He had, we saw some shorthanded breakaways from him. Opportunity. It was awesome to see him. And same when Duhaime got opportunities too. He was electric on the penalty kill.
I would more opt to go Duhaime on PK2 with Gaudreau, with Brodin, with Faber. Have that be your second unit, because yes, speed is what gets you opportunities to score on the end. I don't know. Good work, Daily Face-Off. I'm not bitter. But that's going to do it for today's episode. So again, don't miss Brandon Duham on tomorrow's episode of Locked on Wild. Should be a lot of fun. And you'll be able to hear that first thing in the morning. So don't worry about that. But make sure that you do subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms so you don't miss out on any of our new episodes throughout the rest of the week. We have new episodes every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.